I'm so happy to be here, so happy to see so many friendly faces, and to be part of this really important and excellent panel. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and we're going to get right into it. Next to me is former Senator Jen Metzger, champion for hemp and hemp legislation, and lifelong environmentalist. And then we have Bob Gunn, and he is an expert on energy rebates and policy. And Ben Dobson, who is a rock star, for sure. He is a former board member of the NYC GPA and is the CEO of Hudson Hemp and a bunch of other great ventures, including Hudson Carbon, and we'll get into all that. So thank you for being here, Ben. All right, so sustainability is this kind of all-encompassing term that really should impact every single part of our policy and the way we do business in the industry. With the existential threats of climate change and how we can get this industry right from the beginning when we talk about, restorative justice and equity, sustainability needs to be right there. And so, Jen, as a policymaker, what are the opportunities and responsibilities you see as we try to develop a brand new legitimized industry here in New York in terms of sustainability?
Thanks, Kaylin. So first, this is called Revelry, and we all should be reveling, but I'm going to bring it down a notch because we are in a climate crisis, right? I mean, I hope there are no doubters among you, because we are in a serious climate crisis, and we have to pull together as communities and change course and get off of fossil fuels. It's going to get better. It's going to get more positive. Just hold on. But it's serious. And when I was in the state legislature, we passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which was at the time like nation-leading legislation to address climate change, but really it's like the minimum that we need to do. And we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030. So that's like less than 9 years away. That's a huge amount of change. We have to get to net zero emissions by 2050. So those are big changes. And we have to do this equitably. We have to do this equitably, and that was a driving goal of our climate law, as it was a driving goal of our legalization law. And they're related, because the same communities that have been disproportionately harmed by the war on drugs have been disproportionately harmed by environmental pollution and the siting of incredibly unhealthy, dirty infrastructure in Black and brown communities, in low-income communities. So to me, this is all negative, but the flip side is that we're going to create something new, and we're going to create something equitable, and we're going to create something sustainable. And it will transform our economy. We will make people healthier, because the health impacts people are suffering today are unacceptable. We will create thousands and thousands of new jobs, and we will create new industries, and that includes cannabis, because cannabis offers, beyond its medicinal value, beyond all the benefits we know, it's got tens and thousands of other uses, and it's a real sustainable alternative. But we have to do it right, and there are wrong ways to do it, and there are right ways to do it. And in New York State, we're going to learn from what other states have done, and we are going to create a model that is equitable, sustainable, and restorative. So stop there.
Excellent. Perfect. And so, Ben, what you've been doing in your career for so long is figuring out how to use capitalism to be environmentally harmonious, right? And so, when we talk about some of these lofty goals, they have to make dollars and cents when it comes, economically. So what sort of experiences can you take from your career over into cannabis?
So at Hudson Carbon, we work on understanding how to scientifically measure the impacts of good agricultural practices and ecological restoration. In that, we study industrial hemp and its ability to sequester carbon and provide other ecosystem services and replace harmful inputs. And when we think of cannabis, we often get a feeling of, oh, it's a plant, it's got to be good. And it really, all plants have the potential to be wonderful, but it depends where that plant's grown, how it's grown, what's put on it, and how we interact with it. So I would say capitalism is a system we have, and markets have proven to be very efficient, but we don't value nature or the services it provides. We've conveniently put land and its function out of our financial equation. And if we're really going to address climate change, we can actually make a profitable industry out of it by rewarding land and its function for its role, and by really levying costs on the pollution and the sources of the problems. So cannabis could be a solution or a problem or a little bit of both. And I think we're going to run into many complicated and detailed points to address across all sections of the supply chain, from growing to energy usage to packaging, and then also thinking about upstate where we have lots of space, or down in the city where we don't, and how do we create equitable supply chains that respect people and climate.
Well, and that leads me to Bob. You know, in this room right now, we have a lot of small business owners who might not be, you know, very well capitalized. So how can policy work to empower these business owners to be able to afford some of the technologies that will allow them to be more sustainable?
Thanks for the question. I'd like to see energy resources, you know, let's say energy, gas, electric, and water for that matter, and their waste streams treated as an ingredient for cannabis. So it's, you know, benchmarking, collecting data is the best, I think, building block for any good energy policy. I've been working in cannabis since 2014 with about 250 cannabis clients, and none of the states I've worked in, which is 28 states, so I've done some hemp and non-cannabis as well, have collected the data that we need to really say, here's what an industry standard is, here's what an efficient industry is. But the policies that, once we have that data and we have a measuring stick against which to measure what the efficient option is, the policies that exist already are utility incentives. So National Grid or Con Ed or LIPA or Rochester, NYSEG, et cetera, these utilities are already giving incentives to reward the innovators, the people buying LEDs or efficient dehumidification. It's based on how energy efficient how much energy it will use compared to industry standard, and the incentives already exist. So, you know, clean technology in a grow will cost about $100 per square foot more than standard technology. Then, you know, legacy lighting, you know, high pressure sodium. That stuff we're comfortable with. We know how it works. We want to make the jump, just like we might want to make the jump to electric vehicles, but we need a little help and transition to get there. And I think there's a really good opportunity for policy to lay the groundwork to say, here's what the data we want to record is, so that we know where we are today and where we need to get to, and we can measure those impacts.
Absolutely. And Jen, on that vein, you know, ensuring equity, again, you know, go back to the small business owner, the less well-capitalized, you know, business owner. And so where do you see the role of the state to ensure that they can, you know, be sustainable and incorporate these practices in their business in a way that is accessible for them, truly?
Sure. First, I want to just, I have a little bit of a different opinion, which is great. Good. It's a panel that has a different diversity of views. But, you know, other states now are realizing that they made mistakes when they put their regulations in place and ignored the environmental and climate implications of their policies. And so all these businesses made investments, and now they're like gonna have to change, you know? So we do have to do it right in New York the first time, and it makes more financial sense to do so. And those technologies, they have a higher upfront cost, but they greatly reduce your energy costs, and your energy costs are your #1 cost if you grow indoors. And so this is like talking about your business sustainability, and those costs are just going up over time, because that is the direction of New York. I mean, gas prices this winter going up 50%, right? So you gotta keep that in mind. But the other thing is, it's not just about indoor grow, it's also about outdoor grow, and other states have made mistakes by not supporting outdoor grow. And in New York, we're going to support it. And greenhouses are kind of in between the two models too in terms of their emission impact. So it's not just about the technologies, and those are lower capital costs too. It's just the barriers to entry into outdoor grow are much lower than like building a big indoor warehouse facility in New York City, that's for sure. In terms of equity, it's going to be really important for the state to support and help. First of all, help legacy businesses that have already made investments, helping them transition with these technologies, and also it's going to be important to have assistance and grants of not just financial assistance for equity applicants, but also technical assistance. I would love to see us have, some staff that are there and available to help businesses, to help applicants as they are planning their business to do so in the most sustainable manner. And we'll be providing guidance in that kind of thing as well.
Excellent. And I think everyone's excited, about the ability to encourage outdoor grow, especially in New York. There's a long history of growing, outdoors. And we talk about the legacy marketplace, right? The legacy operators. And I think also it's incumbent on regulators to look at not just allowing for it, but allowing for it to succeed in a way that doesn't cost much money, right? 10-foot high fences around the whole grow, that's cost prohibitive. Failures based on, biological testing, right? We gotta think about that. And so, Ben, you have a lot of experience with, outdoor growing, whether it's, hemp or within your family in Massachusetts, outdoor cannabis cultivation. So what do you see as some of the opportunities around growing outdoors and also some of the challenges that entrepreneurs should know?
A terrific question. So New York State's a demand state. We buy $5 billion of cannabis a year, and most of it comes from drier states. Colorado, but namely California, Southern Oregon, Mexico, the dry side of Jamaica, historically dry places. So we have to deal with humidity, and humidity can cause mold, and mold ruins buds. And I don't think anybody wants to sell, smoke, or grow a moldy bud. So our number one focus is how do we grow good quality, mold-free flower outdoors. My father's, I think, in the crowd today. He's doing this right now in Massachusetts. He's in his third year. And some of the things, the most critical thing is really soil health and genetics. You need to have a soil that's healthy and able to fight off a lot of the molds, mildews. You need fungi in your soil, not just heavy bacterial loads. And there are a series of organic inputs for soil-grown cannabis, but also the way you manage that soil in rotation is critical. So the fundamentals of organic regenerative agriculture align with the fundamentals of quality cannabis. Another part is the use of autoflowers is tremendously helpful because you harvest your flower as the days are still long and sunny. Because in the fall, what happens? The days get shorter, humidity levels stay longer, you have a high dew point in the morning, and that causes mold. So using early flowering autoflowers, greenhouses with light depth, and then also there's tremendous genetics where a lot of the best genetics from Oregon and California have moved to Maine in the last 5 or 6 years, and Maine growers have really modified these genetics to function in the East Coast. That being said, we can still get hurricanes outdoors. We can get floods. If you plant in heavy clay soil, it's just not even worth planting. You need to be in a light, well-drained soil that's healthy. So there are tons of agronomic principles to follow, but I do envision an industry that's running on a backbone of outdoor production with supplemental greenhouse and indoor production, but indoor in the context of extreme innovation. How are we going to capture geothermal heating and cooling? How can we use the sun, the angle of our greenhouse to capture the most possible sun? And how can we, even within that context, limit or at times eliminate usage of electricity? And then when using it, how are we producing that electricity? Or how are we insetting that carbon into a natural landscape or otherwise? I think we need to be extremely innovative and put all the tools at disposal for a wonderful, high-quality outdoor production system. And like Jen said, share resources. I know I'm willing to be one. A lot of this industry is proprietary, but we need to share the best in innovation for this plant.
And Ben, to stay on that, I think as a supply chain, as this room represents an entire supply chain, how important is it for the rest of the entrepreneurs, whether it's distributors or retailers or consumers, to understand how to embrace outdoor cannabis, right? I think a lot in New York is up in condition to look for the densest nugs, right? And, a certain, we're looking at the cannabis coming from California, and it should all be like that. But, how important do you think that is for the rest of the supply chain to fully embrace, the quality and the hard work and the small craft of outdoor cultivation?
The market dictates what is going to be purchased at the highest possible price. And this market is tuned to the best quality cannabis in the world. It flies in on planes every day from all over and has the most efficient distribution system in the world. So the state's got a lot to compete with. I'll start with that. Behind, you can call and within 10 minutes have great flower from all over the world in most parts of Manhattan. So what are we going to do about that? Well, we're going to need to make really good flower. We're going to need to work with people in industry who know what type of strains are selling, and then work with breeders who are acclimating to this climate to do that. That's not going to happen overnight, and I do think it'll take a plurality of production practices to meet the needs of this market.
And Bob, real quick, you told me when we were standing over there that you've done over 200 some energy audits, right? So presumably we have entrepreneurs here who are going to be, looking to do so, right? What do they need to know now?
Well, yeah, I've done energy rebates, not just audits, but rebates, working with electric utilities to help people invest in the better technology. I think I agree with everyone here that we're building out new infrastructure. We're going from maybe a residential scale grow to a commercial grow. Let's build it correctly. And it costs more money. Greenhouses are great technology and outdoor as well, but we need new utility infrastructure. So we have an opportunity to build better utility infrastructure. We need renewables, but we need battery storage to integrate with that. So there need to be programs we can plug into. At the state level, I think there's a huge opportunity, like we saw 2 presentations ago, to have state level financing opportunities. New businesses and cannabis businesses really aren't eligible for financing traditionally. Hopefully we can change that and get ahead of it. So we're building better technology that serves, grid stability and things like that. So I think what growers need to know is don't be afraid to ask dumb questions like, here's what I want to do, a geothermal greenhouse. What would it take? What opportunities are there? I think there's more available today than we know. And the electric utilities I would look to first to help. They want to invest in that infrastructure because it's going to, they need to build out the grid, and someone's going to own these assets, let's say battery storage and micro renewables. And I think growers are in a position of building stuff out right now, and I don't think it needs to be dirty energy that gets built out.
Jen, you want to, I want to talk about not just energy when it comes to, not just energy, right, when it comes to sustainability, but also the tremendous amount of plastic created. When we look at other states and you see all the throwaway, the exit bags and everything, where can New York lead the way in terms of packaging so we are not just creating more plastic than we are bud?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are actually, I'd say 2 categories of waste that I've been thinking a lot about. And one is the plastic waste. Single-use plastics, packaging is the main source of single-use plastic waste. And that whole single-use plastic industries, that's like the plan B for the fossil fuel industry because they don't have a future in energy, so they've moved to plastics. No joke, that's for real. And there was just a great new analysis that came out that basically looked at it from an emissions perspective. Plastics is the new coal in terms of emissions. So it's really important to get away from single-use plastics. As I mentioned earlier, hemp, really using the full plant. We could be taking the fiber that we're not using, when we're, for hemp, for CBD products, for adult use, whatever, and be making packaging out of that. We should be closing those circles on production we should beyond that, we should also be looking at, there are lessons to be learned from other states. They've actually made it really expensive to dispose of waste from the adult use and medical industry because they don't want it diverted, which is important. You don't want the waste diverted. But it has had, they've had bad policies that have ended up costing the businesses a lot and sending it all to landfills to turn into methane and warm the globe. So in New York, we have to make it easy for people to compost and grow that industry of organic composting, in addition to using the plant for new products. And then I would also say we have to, again, like sometimes regulations, they're trying to achieve one goal and they can have adverse consequences for other goals. And there are packaging requirements around like child safety, making it child-proof or whatever, child-resistant, I think is the language. But we have to think about how we can encourage reuse, because ultimately that's the cheapest, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to save your businesses too. If you're a small business, you can collect a deposit on the container, and then you're gonna have relationships with your customers. They're going to come back to you and again and again and again, and you should be able to refill it rather than putting it in a new bag. So these are the kinds of things we have to be looking at.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the panel, right, for being here, and on the Revel for throwing probably the best cannabis conference I've ever been to.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.